Gotta have some sugar golden crisp because I haven't had cereal or breakfast yet and I'm hungry. Yum.
It's interesting you bring that up, Matt. I haven't had breakfast yet either. I'm starving right
My
now.
brain automatically goes to sugar cereal because that's where it's at, right?
Totally swear it's sad. I really like what are those Reese's balls? The peanut butter and chocolate
totally
ones. They've
yeah.
got there's a Whole Foods right next door here, and they have the organic-y ones of that. But they've got a box of the peanut butter balls and a box of the chocolate balls, and you just pour the two boxes into the bowl at the same time, and it's just a sugar overload of heaven. By the way, welcome to Linux and Whatnot, episode 10. My name is Bryan Lunduke. That guy is Matt friggin' Hartley.
That's what they tell me. That's what they tell me.
That's the word on the street.
Tell me. That's right.
So last episode we were talking to the FreeDOS guy, which was cool.
Very cool.
But not technically Linux. This episode, we're talking to people from a open source, decentralized, instant messaging, secure servery system, which is very cool and tangentially related to Linux, but again, not technically Linux. I would like people to just ignore that fact for the moment because it's related and it's cool all together, and I feel like that gives it a pass. It's like
I feel like there's Linuxy stuff in there, so like you could even like kind of work that in.
Did we mention the word Linux in there somewhere? Yes, we did. We just
did.
We just did just now. It's perfect.
Anyway,
so that is my Patreon link. That is where people give me dollars. Dollar bills, y'all. Matthew, do you have links that are cool?
Freedom Penguin, right here. Click it. People write things. I have no idea why these strange folks just keep sending me articles.
It's
so
weird.
I just put them up. It's crazy. I don't know what's up with that.
And they're readable too.
Right?
They're not terrible.
I even have an editor that just like drops out of the sky and does stuff. It's cool. Huh?
You have an editor?
I have an editor. Oh, you bet. You've seen, man, I can't edit to save my life. I have 3 layers of editing just to make the mashing of the keyboard words.
I tell you, I am so happy I have editors.
Right?
Otherwise, I would look terrible. The entire universe would be making fun of me on a constant basis if I didn't have editors around. Holy moly.
The Grammarly app only goes so far.
Right?
Yeah, it doesn't. No, it's just not quite there for me. So,
so let's see. Coming up, wanted to make mention of this. If anyone is in the Pacific Northwest area, I'm going to be speaking, I believe, at the Bellingham Linux Users Group in November sometime. At the beginning of November, something like that. Anyway, I want to put that out there. They're up at the very, very far end of Washington State. So if you're like in Vancouver, British Columbia, or Seattle, Washington, or something like that.
Same places they do the fest. I think you guys are probably going to meet at the technical college, I would think,
I have absolutely no idea.
I used to hang out with them occasionally, and usually it's either that or in what's his name's house, which isn't very helpful. So I'm going to say probably BTC.
Super helpful. No, I assume I'll find out before I show up. That's good enough, right?
Put out a tweet.
Put out a friggin' tweet. All right. That's all I've got to say. That is all I've friggin' got to say about this. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, but you really, really want an audio version, we do have an audio feed. So go into the links in the notes. There's an RSS feed that really attractive man in the blue hat puts together every week. So you can grab those and listen to the audios and the whatnots. But then the problem with that is you don't get to observe our gorgeousness. We have 2 gorgeous men right here. It is gorgeous, and you get to see these. Look at that hat. Look at that hat. I
come in a bow, and sometimes I wear pants.
Hey Matt, can you sing me a song and start the show?
I like my pants. I like my pants. Sometimes I wear pajamas.
Matthew, I don't know. So you've been following my ridiculous articles where I've been trying to do like privacy stuff, right? I've been trying to move away from all the googly stuff and the non-encrypted-y stuff and the centralized run by Apple stuff. Though I don't do that one. But I'm trying to move away from all that stuff. And one of the big hardest problems that I keep encountering is instant messaging, in part because half of every Linux nerd on the planet is using Hangouts, which drives me crazy, and a variety of other reasons. So we've been researching into this. You and I have been researching this. Other people have been bouncing ideas off me. And one of the possible suggestions for where people should move to in terms of instant messaging and like video chat and the like that keeps coming up over and over again is Matrix.
Yes.
And so we brought on two of the folks behind the project. I want to let you guys introduce yourselves because I don't really know you other than you seem fantastic and are working on this cool project. So let the whole universe know who you are.
Hi, Brian. I guess I'll start. I'm Matthew Hodgson, and I'm the tech lead of Matrix. And I think we came across each other on Twitter the other day when you were saying, hey, what's the solution for open source messaging? And I said, pick us, pick me. So
which, by the way, is a great way to get my attention.
Sure. Well, either way, thank you for inviting us on the show to have a chat about Matrix.
All right. And who's with you today?
So, hi everyone, I'm Amandine, and I'm the product manager of Riot, Riot.im, which is one of the app built on top of Matrix.
Got it. Okay, so let's start from a real basic level here. What is Matrix?
So Matrix is a pretty unusual project. It's an attempt to define a whole new open standard for interoperable communication. A bit like XMPP and Jabber for people who are familiar with that, except it's really focusing on today's use cases, Hangouts or Facebook or WhatsApp or Slack kind of use cases, but supporting that off the bat as a sort of first-class citizen. So it's a protocol that we've written, a whole bunch of HTTP APIs which we've specified that make it incredibly easy to go and send and receive encrypted, secure messages, and that could be instant messages, group chats, VoIP, video, and in fact you can use it to synchronize any kind of JSON data you like. So nice. That's kind of the slightly technical angle of it. Another way of thinking of it is really trying to build a meta network which goes and links together all of the different messaging networks which we see today. Because, as you said, we've got all of these walled gardens out there. We've got Hangouts, we've got Skype, we've got kind of the phone network is a walled garden.
Right.
IRC networks are basically walled gardens, even if they're kind of spread out a bit. And so Matrix attempts to be this kind of common ground that links them all together and really provides the unification, the bridging between all of these, which historically nobody's ever managed to get working before.
And
that's what we're trying to do.
And with no central server, really. I mean, it's kind of distributed. It's federated, if you will, right? I mean, so what's the motivation behind that?
Yeah, so Matrix is completely decentralized in that everybody can go and run a server, and there are 2 server implementations out there which are in active development at the moment. One is called Synapse, written in Python, and another is called Rumo, written in Rust, which is in alpha at the moment, but it's looking really promising. And the idea is that everybody goes and runs their own Matrix home server, just like they can run a email server or a web server today, and they just start participating in the wider network. So it's sort of federated in that it's a bunch of servers talking to one another, like you get with email or Jabber or something. But on the other side, it's actually more decentralized, because one of the really interesting things about Matrix is that the rooms in which conversations happen are replicated across the whole network of the servers which participate in that room. So it's actually very similar to Git in terms of architecture. So in Git, everybody has their own repository, and they just go and push and pull between those repositories. In Matrix, it's basically the same model. That said, you don't shift the room all the way to the client. Instead, the clients talk via HTTP to the servers, and then the servers go and share the rooms between each other. So it's kind of hybrid, half federated, half decentralized. But the really fun thing is that there is no single point of failure or no single point of control over any of these rooms. There isn't a chat server or a XMPP muck or an IRCD that can go down and kill your connection or kill your history. Instead, the room is literally replicated over everybody who participates.
That is actually pretty cool. So, and then Riot is basically an implementation. Basically, it's taking Matrix, kicking it up and running, and providing people with a common place to hop in and join it. I joined up with Riot and was using the client to talk with a few friends, and don't take this the wrong way, but I was surprised it worked so well. You know, a lot of times when you've got really cool projects, I mean, this feels very grand in scope. And a lot of times when these projects happen in the open source world and you try it out, it has a couple of great ideas and a couple of great implementations, but then they kind of fall apart when you really start using it until it kind of gets a little further along. This actually worked. So how long has Riot been up and running at this point?
So yeah, as you say, what we've been trying to do with Riot is provide an app which is leveraging a very cool tech and make it very glossy, an application which is very glossy for anyone to be able to use it, and not only a small group of very technical folks in one corner of the world. So we started working on it last year. We launched it in beta under the Vector name in June at the Decentralized Web Summit. And we launched it officially, like full public launch under the Riot name 2 weeks ago, actually, back 19th of September.
And it hasn't exploded yet? Like it hasn't like come crashing down on itself at this point? It's still actually working, right? I mean, that's right. That's pretty cool all by itself. So what's cool. What's the goal? What's the goal with Riot? I mean, like, when you look out there in the world, what do you see as your competitor? What are you replacing? What's the one service you want to destroy and bring all the users over to Riot?
So we want to be the one true place for collaboration. And so typical apps we are playing against are Slack or Skype for Business, or just small names like these ones, like no one knows and no one uses. So the interesting thing is that we are here as a proposal for people who wants to have a great collaboration tool, but also we provide bridges to the existing applications so that we're not forcing anyone to get embedded in our service. And it's actually a choice because you prefer the user interface, because you like the bridges to other apps, because you like the integrations which are available in here. So that's an interesting position to be in.
It kind of is. So this was just to kind of take a step back and kind of look at this a little bit from a high level. So I installed Riot. I've mostly been playing with Matrix via Riot. And what caught me off guard initially, and I don't know why it caught me off guard, was me and two other friends got set up over on Riot. Got our accounts all set up, and then we're like, okay, we gotta add each other, we gotta find each other, and it took us a moment for it to click that it's almost like email addresses in how you have to reference other user accounts, because you're not just referencing Bryan Lunduke, you're saying Bryan Lunduke on the Riot server, and then this other person on a different server, and it's not a difficult thing, but I found it oddly confusing, considering I actually know how this stuff works, and it's just that no other chat services do that. Are you feeling like with Matrix and with Riot, you've got a bit of an education hump to overcome? Because this is a very different way of doing things. I mean, there's not a central server to connect to. There's not just a username for people to type in and search for. How do you get over that hurdle? How do you do that?
So it's definitely something which have to be handled properly so that we can actually spread the service to anyone, and not people who are able to understand the tech or have any interest in the tech, actually. So the first step to it is actually be able to invite people via email. And what we want to do in the end is make the actual, what we call the Matrix ID, completely transparent, hide it. And the dream is to have be able to reference people by any information we know about them. So be it their email address or their phone number or any other login information that we have. So that's finally how we want to actually go over this step. So today we're using email addresses to hide the Matrix ID and make it easier for people to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the thing which I would say is the weakest point of Riot and Matrix as a whole right now, which is a bit of a shame, I guess, as it's one of the first things that people hit. And as Amandine says, the idea is that we're meant to aggregate all the different identities there. And currently this is bodged, honestly. I mean, architecturally, it's a good idea in that you have the ability to do this lookup, and it could be a phone number, email address, Facebook ID, Weber ID, whatever the hell it is. It should be any kinds of random identifier, should be then mapped to what we call these matrix IDs, and these look a bit like Twitter handles, so it's at Matthew, except we then have to put a domain on the end to go and talk about the server where that account lives. So I'm at Matthew:matrix.org, which we pronounce MatthewOnMatrix.org, on being short for colon. But we don't expect people to use that other than the real geeks. Instead, it should be, hey, I got someone's phone number. How am I going to contact them? Well, you go and ask Matrix to look that identity up and to map it through to the Matrix ID. And this is actually a surprisingly tough problem to do in a decentralized way, because you have the whole question of trust over who you trust to actually validate an email address or a phone number or whatever it is. And what we did was to punt on it unashamedly. And for the first cut of Matrix, the only bit of the entire system that is centralized is unfortunately the identity server, which currently contains these mappings. And it's a very, very simple Python thing that's it's about 1,000 lines of code. Sits there on GitHub, and we run a cluster of it across a bunch of different servers run by different people in the Matrix ecosystem. But in the end, it's basically like DNS root servers. It is, in the end, unfortunately, a centralized thing. And it sits there sending out validation emails to check that people are who they say they are, and then maps that into Matrix. But you're completely right that the user experience in Riot is unfortunately a bit limited in terms of how we expose that.
It's not bad. I mean, it's not like it's a bad experience. Yeah, it's just a little different, and it's just not the same as you'd get with, you know, Hangouts or AOL Instant Messenger. Does anyone else use AOL Instant Messenger anymore?
I don't think so.
I don't think anyone. I think that's been outlawed at this point. But it's just
funny story. We do actually use AOL because we have a bridge to it from Matrix because we're all about bridging everything. And
what do you have? What do you have bridges for at this point? Because this is something I really haven't looked into Matrix.
Well, I mean, the bridging is a lot of where it's at. So right now on Riot Web, we're providing hosted bridges. Anybody can set up into Slack, the one that no one's heard of. Getter, which hopefully some people have heard of, is the kind of thing that piggybacks on top of GitHub, providing chat rooms on top of Git repositories. Yep. We've got IRC, which is huge, with bridges through to Freenode, Mosnet. We hack into running their own bridge, which is really cool. We're not having to do it for them. SNUNet, which is one of the Reddit alt IRC networks, and a bunch of others. We've got a queue of about 20 other networks waiting for us to turn on bridges. We're rolling it out on a kind of weekly basis so that we get through all the teething problems each time a new network comes online. Those are the ones which you can immediately deploy yourself. But then the community are out there writing bridges all over the shop. So our Gitter bridge is written in Node, but someone else has written one in Python. Somebody wrote a Telegram bridge last week in Python and set that running. So I had this trippy experience of going into a room on SNUNet, on OFTC actually, the OFTC IRC network, after we turned on the bridge to see what was happening there, and found a room full of Telegram users who had little M's after their name, showing that they come in via Matrix. And it turned out it was the OpenStreetMap guys in the Spanish language OpenStreetMap community who had gone and bridged via Riot their Slack, their IRC, another IRC network, Telegram, and I think also Gitter. So a complete sort of 5-way bridge all into the same place. And we're having a whale of a time in Spanish. It's crazy.
Cool. That is cool. Well, and one thing I wonder if you guys are seeing as a trend is that maybe you guys are, like fine as it is. I mean, the idea that, it's a little harder to use, you got a little more setup, you got to kind of figure out how people are going and whatnot. I think that's a fair trade-off in exchange for something that's decentralized. I don't think that's a problem. I think that's just a minor learning curve that people can either honestly can adapt to. I don't think it's that difficult to use at all.
It doesn't have to be that way, though. It
would be awesome. Yeah. But it's still cool. I mean, like even as it is, it's like it's decentralized. This is awesome. So, but I totally hear you.
It
I totally hear you.
It could definitely be better. I mean,
Sure.
one of the interesting decisions we made was to make the matrix IDs tied to a domain for now, which on one level is kind of good because you can make them a lot more human readable than if you look at what, I know, Tox or I know ring.cx or one of the other more one of the other protocols out there. They tend to give everybody public keys for their identifier. So it's like, hey, yeah, you can call me on Tox, and here's my kind of Bitcoin ID style great big hash, which is not a great UX. So
that's not a great one.
We could do so much better.
So, I'd like to transition over to the security side just momentarily, because this is where I've been living the last week or two, and Matrix is kind of a unique one. So it's fully decentralized. How would you personally rate the security and privacy features within Matrix and Riot? Like, how would you rate them at this point? Deep breath.
Right now,
deep breath.
Yeah. So right now, the really, really cool stuff is in beta. So we're literally on the cusp of having it absolutely kick ass. And there's about 50 of us who are playing on a daily basis with all of the new stuff. And the new stuff
I like that.
End-to-end
I kind of hope someone uses that as a quote for this. On the cusp of absolutely kick ass. That's pretty good. Okay, answer. Sorry. That's just a really good word. A really good phrase. So in beta, what's coming in beta that makes the security and privacy absolutely kick ass?
So the point of the Matrix from the get-go was that you would have end-to-end encryption baked into the protocol from the outset. The reality is that it's taken us like a year and a half to get the end-to-end encryption designed and implemented and critically audited, so that we can actually use it in the wild. And we launched it as beta on Riot Web back on September the 19th. That also coincidentally lined up with the beginning of an audit which NCC Group have been doing of the code base. And basically what we've done is to write a cryptographic ratchet called OLM, which is heavily inspired by the stuff that Signal and Wire and other end-to-end encrypted messengers use. And it's based on the same designs that Open Whisper systems that Moxie Marlinspike and Trevor Perrin originally defined for the axolotl ratchet about 3 years ago now. And they published a sketch of that spec. We've gone and taken the sketch and implemented our own implementation of it. It's nothing to do with Open Whisper systems. It's totally independent. It's an Apache licensed implementation in C and C++. It's basically C, but with a little bit of C++ 11 around the edges. And it's called OLM, and it's released as libOLM. And that is what we're using for all of our end-to-end stuff for the simplest possible case of one-to-one conversations.
Okay.
But an interesting thing about Matrix is that conversation history is the kind of first-class citizen. It's not like XMPP or AIM or email or something where you just send a message from A to B and good luck if you want to synchronize the scroll back between different devices, different device or different clients or whatever. Instead of Matrix, you can think of it as literally synchronizing the history of a room between different servers and then to different clients. So when it's all about keeping the kind of consistent scroll back as the thing, like think of it like a Git repository basically, but for conversation. Okay. It's just like that. You're synchronizing chunks of history between things. It's kind of critical to have end-to-end encryption in there because in a big room Matrix HQ, we've got 5,000 people right now, and they're split over probably 800 different servers right now. And
in one
each
room.
of those 800 servers, in one room. I mean, it scales great. It's really quite exciting relative to Slack.
I should say so.
Fair enough. So you've got let's say you've got 100+ people sitting in a room. So how do you handle end-to-end encryption when you've got 100 people all within a singular room and there's no centralized server and everything's distributed and I don't even know what the right word is, poofed all over the various servers that are running. How do you do that? I mean, how do you do that?
word poof is now going to make its way into the Federation spec as a
I
technical term for
really
replicating
hope so.
a local DAG across different servers. So, I mean, it's a really interesting problem. First of all, you really want to have encryption in there, because if you've got like 50 servers and each server's got 2 people on it, 100 users, you risk otherwise just replicating the JSON as plain text over 50 different servers, and any sysadmin can sniff what's going on. And it's how email works, let's face it. People's IMAP repositories have got plain text everything in there.
Yeah, but we don't want to look at email as the gold standard for security, you know. So
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, first thing we did initially when we implemented the Elm ratchet about 6 months ago was a fairly naive implementation where if I send a message into that room, I would literally encrypt it for every participant in the room. And that's how iMessage does it, for instance.
Yeah.
But you have horrible n-squared problems there, because every message suddenly ends up being 100 times bigger than it needed to be, because you're encrypting it 100 times over for everybody. So that's been the real impetus to write an entirely new ratchet called Megolm, and that's what we're actually using in Riot today. So Megolm is like Om, but like 1,000,000 times better in Greek. And that's basically so the way that Megolm, or Megolm, however you pronounce it, works, is that you have a single ratchet which is describing the conversation in the room. So each message gets encrypted once with a key that keeps advancing for every different message. And then people can basically hop on and off that ratchet. So they can go and exchange their state to tell other people, hey, you want to get involved in the room? Well, here's basically the key, except it's not a static key. It's this constantly evolving key, so that they can be cut into the conversation, or they can, or once they leave the room, you can change the key so that they can't see what's going on. And the sexy thing is that we exchange that key via Ohm. So the actual key exchanges are still one-to-one using the axolotl style super high crypto end-to-end thing, but the actual information you're exchanging is a totally different ratchet. So you kind of get best of both worlds. And as far as I know, nobody has done this correctly before in such a way that lets you synchronize history between new devices and to new people in a room at one extreme, or at another extreme, you could deliberately keep changing the key on people, at which point you can't synchronize history, because you're giving the new key out for the room every message. And so unless somebody keeps every single key ever for the room, which is a real no-no, and no sensible client would ever do
not be delightful.
That'd be bad.
Yeah.
And so you basically have the entire spectrum. At one level, you've got perfect forward secrecy, where you change the key constantly. At the other extreme, you can basically have a single key that evolves throughout the lifetime of a room. And it's up to you on the room to say how much history sync, how much visibility do you want to give people to the amount of history in the room. And that's the cool thing about Megolm. And we're thoroughly excited about it, and have just got some, I guess that's the real thing which is being audited at the moment, because it's pretty new cryptography, and we want to find out just how well it works in reality and what the security experts think of it.
And this is all by default, right? I mean, like once this new functionality hits, everything's encrypted by default?
So we're going to do it for private rooms by default. In a public room, like, what's the point of end-to-end encrypting hash Debian on OFTC? There's like 6,000 people in there. It's already being logged in a billion different places.
I don't know, man. Those Debian guys, they're pretty secretive. They like to keep things on the DL, you know what I'm saying? So private room. So if I start up a conversation between you and me, that one would be encrypted by default. Interesting. Yep. Very interesting. So how do you... So, okay, looking out at the rest of the world, there's Signal and Telegram and Wire and whatever the hell Google just released. I'm not even sure what they're calling it anymore. Is it Allo still, or is it anyway? So there's all these different chat systems going on with varying levels and types of security, right? How realistically does Matrix and Riot fit into that? I mean, how does it fit into that spectrum? So like on like Signal's gotten a lot of good buzz and traction within the world, saying, okay, end-to-end encrypted, it's very good, but on the other hand, it also is directly tied to a phone number and can only work on a phone, and lots of various other little things. So where does Matrix and Riot fit in amongst basically its peers. Where do you see it fitting?
Right. So, I mean, talking on the matrix side as a whole, because the cryptography is currently only implemented in Riot Web, but we've gone and put it into the Matrix client SDKs so that anybody who's using one of the matrix.org SDKs for JavaScript or iOS or Android or whatever is going to get it for free. But in terms of how that fits in with the peers, well, I mean, starting with Signal, Signal's great. I use it, and certainly used it before we implemented our own end-to-end encryption. It has, as you say, the problem that it's tied to phone numbers, and everybody has or wants to share their phone number. It's tied into the Google services on Androids, and there's been lots of drama about people trying to run it on F-Droids without the Google dependency, and how Signal and Open Whisper systems have or haven't supported that.
Right.
In terms of cross-device synchronization, it's interesting. They've been very cautious about supporting desktop deployments and browser-based deployments, quite rightly. I think iOS only just sprouted the ability to share your iOS phone with your Android, with your browser last week or so. The user experience is pretty minimal. The idea of replaying history onto a newer device is completely anathema to them, because it's all about security and secrecy at whatever the cost. And it's a very different philosophical perspective to us, where, hey, sometimes you want a room where you want to be able to share history and you want it to be encrypted. And sure, it's going to be less secure because nasty three-letter agency or whoever it is could perhaps go and also join that room and read the history.
Nasty three-letter agency, huh? Who's that?
I don't know. Over in the UK,
the Ministry of Magic or something.
Let's just call it the Ministry of Magic. Yeah,
that's what I call it. Yeah.
So okay, but that's pretty fair. So how do you? I should back this up. So new features coming pretty quick, or coming down the line. New security and the like that's currently in beta. On the Riot side of things, how quickly, once those changes are in the rest of Matrix, does Riot get to soak those up on the Riot side of things?
Almost immediately, because basically we work completely very closely, and the Matrix side completely fits in the Riot side. So we implement the UI as the Matrix side is actually coming up with the features. And on the interesting side of the security in Riot, we're pushing it as far as providing the ability for people to actually check who is on the other side of the device, or at least check if this device is the verified one for the person who is talking,
Nice.
which is not often provided by other applications, or not at all, I think. So we want the UI
I think
to
the
be
only
clear for that.
the only tool I've ever seen that does that in addition to you guys is Wire. I think is the only one. Does Signal even offer that?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. That's really cool.
Yeah, Signal has a trust on first use thing, and it warns you if people's key changes after you trust them. So you get some heads up they've got a new device. I haven't seen Wire doing that, but I'm not sure I've tested it enough. But for whatever, for better or worse, we make it a very explicit thing on Riot currently, that you can see precisely the devices of who you're talking to. So if somebody does suddenly sprout an unexpected iPad, which they didn't have before, then that would be a good reason.
I can't confirm that really is Matt Hartley. Matt Hartley suddenly
I'm
talking
actually
from an
Voldemort.
iPhone. Yeah.
Here, I don't know. That'll work. Very
So
hard.
how big is the Matrix community at this point? How many developers are involved? What's the community like? I mean, obviously you mentioned that the Matrix room is fairly sizable. So how many people are involved in the project?
So, I mean, it's kind of hard to judge the total size, because it's like saying, how big is email? I mean, I guess you can scan the internet and try to guess how many mail servers there are, and then guess how many email addresses
Now I kind of want to know how big
servers.
email is. Yeah, I just want to know that. What do you think if you had to? And I really don't mean to put you on the spot. Like, give me a number for your users or your developers or anything.
I'll happily give you the number. I mean, I'll give you the number. So on matrix.org, which is the original home server, is one of about 900 that we know of right now.
Okay.
And that's literally looking at the servers which are federating with matrix.org, as well as ones which phone home, because we by default enable phone home stats with a big, well, in fact, we don't enable it by default. When you install a Synapse server, it says, hey, do you want to help us grow the project and tell us whether you exist? And I think a lot of privacy-focused people immediately turn it off, quite rightly, but it means we're running a little bit dark there. In terms of the number of users, I think we've got 400,000 right now on matrix.org.
What?
Which is,
wow.
Seriously?
So,
that's some big numbers.
Yeah. No,
are you completely making that up right now? Did you just totally pull that out of your butt? And are you just pretending that? Because that's.
do you want the precise number? Shall I go and tell it to the database?
Yes, I do want the precise number. Absolutely. Because that's ridiculous. I mean,
That's
seriously.
impressive, though. That's really impressive.
Right? I was not expecting him to say that. I was kind of half expecting to hear maybe a couple thousand people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, because I mean, you know, I mean, it's so hard to gain traction in this market.
Sorry, I got it wrong. I got it terribly wrong.
Oh,
So
how bad is it? How bad?
And it's select count star from matrix.users. I'm afraid it's actually only 361,951 right now.
Oh, well,
so
that changes
400K was.
That's completely. I'm hanging up. This is done.
Still kind of 400K, though. I mean, it's like right there.
But seriously, I wasn't expecting you guys to be anywhere near 100,000 at this point because it's hard. I mean, how about on the Riot side? How many people are using Riot so far? Because you just launched. So, I mean, I've signed up. I know a couple other people I know have, but it's so hard to gauge pickup within the mass audience.
So today, in terms of daily active users, we're about a few thousand. So as you say, it's growing up, but it's the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I should make it clear that the 360K is total registered users on that particular server. Looking at the phone home stats, that's about 50% of the total ecosystem. So of the 1,000 servers, 50% of them are on that one service. I mean, that's obviously quite centralized in some ways, but it's kind of inevitable that you see it from somewhere.
Sure.
I think
and if that server goes down, the whole thing keeps running.
Right.
So
this is great.
Yep.
That's fascinating. I honestly did not expect you guys to have that big of an uptick. And not because it's not awesome, but because it's just so hard. Like, how do you win people away from Hangouts or whatever they're currently using and convince them? It just boggles my mind that you've been able to get that much traction, which kind of makes me excited for humanity.
Unfortunately, there is an upper proviso, which is some of these users are bridged from other networks. So of those, the native ones on matrix.org is about 70,000, which is probably more at the 10 that order of magnitude.
Still,
but because people go and bridge it into Slack and IRC and everything else, if I go and bridge this into a Slack with 100 people on it, then those 100 people start talking. Then we do create these bridged accounts in Matrix, which act as the avatar.
I gotcha.
Remote people.
But
so
still,
it's a bit cheeky.
No,
they're participating in the network. Real people.
That's still legit.
So let's say hypothetical here. Me and Matt are like, we're gonna kick up our own Matrix server, right? We're gonna set up our own Matrix server for us and the people who watch the show. So we'll kick it off just for fun. We'll put it up there. As the entirety of the network grows and all of that basically encrypted content is getting magico-poofed all around between all of the servers. Invariably, right, the amount of data that each server has to handle grows, right? So how, as of right now, how big of a server, how beefy of a server is required to run an instance of the Matrix, essentially? And where do you see that going in the future?
So that's a great question. And a bit of an embarrassing one because
I know it is, but I have to ask it.
If you were to spec out a VPS, like what direction would you go?
Yeah.
So for a VPS right now, it has to be quite chunky because Synapse is the only fully functional home server implementation, which is written in Python. It's basically our original proof of concept, which has grown organically in the manner that proof of concepts can. And honestly, it's got a lot better. But right now, if you're using it for kind of small personal use, and you're not getting involved in any huge rooms like Matrix HQ, you're probably good with 1 gigabyte of RAM and about a gigabyte of disk space every few months in terms of storage.
That's not bad.
So I mean, it's more than you'd expect, but it's not a disaster. However, if you do want to get involved in a kind of free form, anywhere, go anywhere, do anything, and participate in huge rooms with thousands of users, then you probably want 2 gigs. And for instance, my personal server runs at about 1.3 gigs of RAM, and an awful lot of that is a cache in RAM of the contents of that particular server, because we support both SQLite and Postgres as the underlying database, but we really, really don't want to spend our lives hammering the database, so we deliberately keep these fairly large chunks of RAM in cache.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all. It's like, I mean, you say it's bad. It's like, I'm waiting for the bad part to happen. That's not.
Well, wait, Matt. Let's ask about Riot. Right. Okay. So you've got the server up and kicking for Riot. What's been your experience with running a Matrix server for Riot? How's that been?
Okay. So today we do use the matrix.org server.
Okay.
Directly. So we haven't spun out a very specific one yet. We're still piggybacking on the matrix.org one.
You're cheating, but in the most wonderful way. I approve.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So how big is that matrix.org server?
Well, for matrix.org itself, with its 400,000 registered users, and we push about 10 messages a second through it. There are about 40,000 rooms which are present on it right now. And what other stats can I give you about the use on it? When we launched Riot, when Riot was launched, it sat on the front page of both TechCrunch and Hacker News all day, which was interesting. Interestingly, Synapse itself held up fine, despite the fact that load was up by a factor of 10 or so. Apart from the load balancer, which we'd forgotten about. Literally, we went and provisioned a kind of default Apache mod proxy load balancer when we set up Matrix 2 years ago, and then forgot about it. And this was the first time we ever had reason to remember that it existed when it with a load of 15. It was like 1,200 was the load on the box. So we were down for about 5 minutes during the launch. But the box
it happens to the best of us.
It's a big ass box. It's got 24 cores and 128 gig of RAM and 16 disks in it. It's a database box we stole from somebody, which used to be like running a sort of primary database master. So, I mean, that's unashamedly us throwing as much hardware as we could at it to make it run fast. But one of the nice things we did in the run-up to Riot is actually to make Synapse horizontally scale. So it's not actually just running a single server. There are about 9 processes there which are handling multiple endpoints of the Matrix API. So you've got 3 of them handling concurrent sync responses. You've got ones doing federation. You've got ones talking to bridges. You've got ones doing push. And there are a couple of others I forget. So we've really gone and sort of not sharded it, but horizontally scaled it out to make the most of all the calls on that. So yeah, if you're pushing like a constant 10, 20, 100 messages a second, then you do want something quite chunky.
Yeah, interesting. Honestly, when I used it, it wasn't exactly pokey at all. I mean, everything performed well. I was working with Riot with a Matrix.org account, and it was working great. Even the video chat was working great. I was surprised. Again, you don't expect younger projects like this to be working that well, and this worked really well, which is why we're talking right now. Otherwise, I would just be like, whatever, they got some time to go. But you guys are really actually onto something. Okay. So for me, let's say for my use case, because I think some people have kind of a similar thing going on. So like for me, I don't use like the Google Play Store and that sort of thing. And so one thing that I thought was quite nice is you lovely Riot folks provide Riot over on F-Droid and places like that, so we can set up a somewhat secure Android-ish system without all the Google stuff on there. And I just actually wanted to mention that because it's not really a question, just a high five aspect. Thank you for doing that. Please don't stop doing that because that would make me sad. Let me ask. Yes. Linux desktop clients. Any plans along those lines currently?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, Riot itself is focused on the web, unashamedly, in iOS and Android. And the iOS and Android app, by the way, are native. They're not crappy web views wrapped in a client.
They're not crappy.
Which is really fun. But what we haven't done on Riot is to port it as a native desktop app. But it's Matrix. So we haven't spoken about other clients at all, which is a bit of a shame because there are loads of them, and some of them absolutely kick ass. So I personally use WeChat all the time. Lots of people, I'm sure, use WeChat for IRC. And one of the first members of the kind of wider Matrix community is a guy called Tor Hvim in Norway who went and wrote a Lua plugin for WeChat that implements Matrix and just makes the WeChat experience of Matrix as good, if not better, than IRC. So you have all the nice things of Matrix in terms of your own home server, infinite scroll back, searchable scroll back, decentralized stuff, end-to-end encryption. He actually implemented end-to-end crypto in WeChat before we had it in the official Matrix SDK, which is a great position to be in. So thanks to for doing that.
Fantastic.
But then that's very much a command line interface for all the folks who like running in a terminal. Whereas in terms of graphical GUI Linux desktop clients, there are 3 main ones being written. None of them by the core matrix.org team, none of them by Riot. So there's one called Quaternion, good matrixy name, which is a Qt client, hence Quaternion, which is written using QML. It's using QML for the widget front-end library, and then it has a library called QMatrix client, which is a C++ Qt style library for actually doing the client API, and it's cute, so to speak. It's really nice. It works well. I've played with it a bunch. They've just implemented rich text in it, so we use Markdown in Matrix for rich text formatting, and so they've just gone and dumped it in there, which is really fun. I think next up they're doing end-to-end encryption using Megolm, obviously, and they also want to put WebRTC in for VoIP, which would be really, really fun. Then there's another client called NAChat, standing for Native Chat, which is much newer. It's about a month and a bit old, and it's all written by a chap whose IRC nick is Ralef. And it's interesting because it's also Qt, but it's kind of philosophically the opposite of Quaternion. And it's really fun in the ecosystem to see when you have 2 projects which are kind of similar, but then come at it from totally different directions. So on the Matrix server side, for instance, we've got Synapse in Python and then Rumor in Rust. And the approach between the 2 is so comically different, it's uncanny. It's like kind of a yin and yang thing. Likewise with Quaternion and NAChat. On NAChat, it's not using QML, it's using the native Qt5 user interface idioms. And it goes and stores everything in local storage, so it has its own kind of local database for all of your history, which means that you can catch up instantly, whereas the Quaternion guy is focused on other things. So it's basically the kind of polar opposite, and it's fun seeing the 2 dev teams going and working together, kind of egging each other on. And as a result, from the Linux community, we've got 2 really very usable, it's as good as Xchat, if not sort of better than Xchat kind of experience.
Really?
For those kind of clients. Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's worth it, really worth playing. Quaternion launched their 0.01 about 2 weeks ago, and NAChat hasn't done a formal first release yet, but both of them are super exciting.
Formal first releases, those are really overrated. It's better to stay in the 0.0 something version numbers, in my opinion.
Put beta on it, you're always good.
All right, Matt.
Yes. No.
Have you used Matrix yet?
No, I have not.
Okay.
No, I have.
All right. So these 2 lovely people
Yeah.
have been telling us about all these really cool things about Matrix. Yeah. Is that in and of itself enough to get you to jump on a Matrix bandwagon?
Absolutely. So based on what I'm hearing, I would say so. Based on the way encryption's handled, the fact that I honestly just looking things over, I think I would definitely want to just go the Riot route. It just no fuss, no muss. I can just get in there and get it done. Yeah.
Right. It's nice.
I mean, that's what I'm drawn to. It's like I'm looking at this. It's like, they're speaking my language. So this is perfect.
So okay. So what was it? I'm genuinely
Honestly,
curious because
use case scenarios. That was the big one for me. Developers, creative agency, small and medium businesses, and ad hoc teams. It's like I can actually then envision what I'm going to do with it. Because that for me, that's I come from more of a marketing background than anything. So for me, it's like okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to be able to plug into this. It's like, all right, cool. So I can actually see myself, and more importantly, I can get others on board with it as well because I think it would appeal to them. So that's pretty cool.
It kind of is appealing. So and this question really, really goes out to the 2 of you and Matt as well.
Sure.
why not go Signal, Wire, Telegram with encrypted? Let's take aside for a moment the decentralized nature of Matrix.
Okay.
Which
So you're
is
putting that aside. Okay.
which is a really big part of it, right? I mean, that's critical, and I love it to pieces. Let's put that aside for a minute, because that's a really hard thing to explain to, like, my sister. If I try and explain that to my sister, she's going to look at me like I have poop all over my face. It is just not going to resonate with her, right? So what can I tell her, the poop face sister, that doesn't involve the decentralized nature of it, to say, don't use Signal, don't use Telegram, don't use Wire, don't use any of these other highly secure, relatively considering, messaging services, but instead use Matrix?
That's tricky, because obviously the decentralization thing is
huge.
a big one.
Okay.
With some people, you can
really
push
is.
it. If I can just touch it quickly, because I guess I didn't mention it earlier when we were talking about Signal. I mean, it is the big thing that you are not trusting a single company with your data. As in, there is no single point where that company can get bought by Google and have the whole, no, thank you for accompanying us on your journey, or our journey, that kind of thing. And that's huge. You can't have your data mined to profile you, to sell you more stuff, and generally make a consumer shell out of you, because there isn't anybody able to do that. So I think that does resonate increasingly with some people. But aside from that, going back to, I mean, the thing that we talk about the most is the bridging, because that is a huge difference. That on Wire or Signal or WhatsApp or Hangouts, you are locked in that ecosystem. And it's not a decentralization thing. It's just, even if you did want to talk to somebody on a different product, you can't. And just financially and commercially, those guys are basically incentivized to lock their people into their products. And that's not good for the user, because your conversations are split across all of these different things. I mean, you can't remember which apps your contacts use. You can't remember where the history is. You can't search it across multiple things. You don't know who to trust. I mean, some of them might be encrypted, some of them might not be, and that's just a mess. And when we started this 2 years ago, it felt a little bit dubious, honestly, because back then people were saying, oh, well, I'm using Slack, or oh, I'm on WhatsApp, I don't need anything else. But in the 2 years that have gone by since then, even the kind of average guy on the street is starting to say, hang on, why have Google pushed this thing called Hello onto my phone? Why do I need another messaging app? And why is it getting more and more and more fragmented? And we've all seen the XKCD cartoon talking about the 15th standards, and what we need is one true standard that everybody will move on to. Matrix isn't that. As in, and it really pisses us off, honestly, when people talk about the XKCD 15th standard, because we're not trying to be one true standard that everybody will move over to. Instead, we're this ridiculously pragmatic thing of just being a glue that goes and links all of the other standards together. So it's like one ring to bind them all. It's a meta standard, lowest common denominator thing to link it together. No, it might be nice if everybody suddenly ditched their own Signal protocol and then started using Matrix instead. But honestly, we don't expect that to happen. Why would they? Why would you? Instead, what would be nice is if they just had a little adapter that meant that they could speak to Matrix, so they could have connectivity through to other people. And we tear down the walls of these walled gardens. And
tear down the walls,
really
man.
A very concrete thing.
Tear down those walls.
Well, I think an interesting way of looking at it is what you said is basically you're tearing down the walls and you're connecting people. They use, they can be on whatever the heck they're using, but everyone can talk to everybody. You don't have to have a special app. You can just, you can bring everyone together at once. That's kind of powerful that I don't think other stuff can say. I know Google certainly can't.
No.
Even a little bit.
Well, I'm pretty confident Google doesn't want to say that. I'm
Google,
pretty sure that would screw up their thing.
You're the product, so yeah.
And to answer your question,
go for it. Sorry.
So just to answer the question on the sister angle, and it's hard.
I feel
to
bad. My sister's going to send me just horrible emails after she sees this too.
But I mean, it's really decided that you can choose whoever you trust, and if you don't want to run the server under your bed, and I certainly don't want to run my own server under my bed, well, I can choose my brother who is actually able to run it, and I know that he's having my conversation and he's controlling it. And as Matt was saying, it's really bringing back the control to you as a user to choose whichever application you want to use, whichever provider you want to trust, whether you actually want to encrypt your conversations or not, and bridge your conversation to whichever service you want, and actually have access to a full ecosystem of integrations which are available. Because one developer wants to integrate his app to a collaboration app, well, it has to choose to do it once for Slack and once for Spark or whoever. And the idea is that Matrix being just open and an ecosystem, they can go and integrate it once with Matrix, and it's going to be available to anyone, any Matrix client, even the non-Matrix client bridged to Matrix. That's cool. Pretty powerful in terms of making a lot of making it more appealing for them.
And it almost feels like the value is almost discovered in layers. Like as people use it, they begin to realize, oh, hey, this is really clicking. Oh, wow, I can actually talk to that person over there using that other thing. And I think that it's maybe a slow discovery process that as they use it, it begins to click with them. Oh my gosh, they really begin to realize this is changing how I communicate with people. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, bouncing on Amandine's point, the fact that we are an open spec is, again, just the hugest thing that that Wire and Signal and Skype and anybody else out there is doing. I mean, the XMPP guys are doing their stuff, and I think Matrix has possibly spurred them a bit to go and work on some new stuff, which is great. And in fact, we're like sharing cryptography now. They've just taken ARM and putting it into OMEMO, which is the XMPP end-to-end encryption spec, which was previously using the Signal code base, which was a little bit dodgy because of licensing and other complications, and they've gone and adopted the own library too. So I mean, it's an example of two open source projects managing to get on relatively well nowadays.
That's craziness.
It is. It shocked me, to be honest. I'm very glad that we're managing to collaborate on it. But either way, apart from XMPP, we're the only other open standard out there for doing this, and from a dev perspective, that's huge in that anybody can write bridges, anybody can write bots, anybody can write clients, anybody can write servers, and we've got the proof with people writing all these crazy clients and all these bridges, like the Telegram bridge I didn't know existed, and that is a very, very appealing thing. It's like the web,
it kind of is,
being a completely open ecosystem.
So now when we look out there, though, so I mean, there's a lot of open source clients out there. I mean, we've got, Wire and Signal are the big ones that come to mind as having open source or open source pieces. I'm failing to think of any one example other than like the XMPP guys where it's 100% open source, completely end to end, other than Matrix. At least that's currently in this ballpark. I'm not sure if Wired is. I know Wired has a lot of open source stuff on the client side. I don't know if they do on the server.
Yeah, so Wire is completely open nowadays on the client, but the server hasn't been opened. I think they're talking about opening it up, though.
I think
Signal, in their defense, they do have both open server, the Tech Secure server, which is, I think still runs it, is open, as is the client. But it's very... if you want to run your own one, you can, but it doesn't federate and it doesn't interoperate with anything else, and you're very much on your own.
It's its own silo, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in theory, you can fire up your own silo. I literally know nobody who has,
because why would you almost? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're on your own. You're not going to talk to anybody else. It's an interesting academic exercise.
Sure.
Telegram is also half open, like Wire. In that the Telegram clients are all open on the client side, but the server is very much not. And in fact, the server is commercial, so it's quite an interesting model there where they're trying to license you however many $1,000 a month to rent out a Telegram server. But oh, by the way, here's the client to go and get you hooked open source. But otherwise, I mean, some of the XMPP stuff is really nice. There's conversations on Android, which when matched up with, I forget which the correct XMPP server is to use with conversations conversations. But that's completely open, and that's probably closest to the Matrix ecosystem that I know of being aggressively open all the way through.
So I gotta ask, this is a big undertaking. Why the hell would you do it? Like I understand the need for wanting this. I want this. I've wanted this for a long time, but it's a huge project and takes a huge amount of time and energy. What's spurring you to make this happen? What is it that makes this a thing that you want to sacrifice sleep and time with anyone to do?
So, I mean, our history is that we're doing this paid for by our day job, which honestly is an amazingly, it's a dream, honestly, to have a job which is willing to pay for you to go off and do completely open source stuff and basically have carte blanche to do whatever the hell we want on an open source basis. And the history for that is that the team we've been together one way or another for about 10 years now, originally doing proprietary VoIP and video stuff. And then we started doing messaging apps for telcos, for people like Singtel in Singapore and in Brazil, which was fun in an interesting learning way, in that we got to learn how to build these things professionally and build a team that knew how to do it and go through all the kind of learning process. In practice, we then were shipping silos, ironically. We were shipping walled gardens, which locks the users into them, and strangely enough, they didn't. Yeah, it was a kind of a slightly depressing exercise, because it turns out that why would the world want yet another walled garden messaging app from a telco? I mean, you see the bad reception that poor Google have got with Hello, and imagine if it was Verizon or somebody pushing an app like that, it would be a very interesting limited audience who would find that compelling. And we basically had a come to Jesus moment of saying, look, what are we doing here? We've got all this amazing tech, and we're just making the problem worse. We're making the fragmentation worse. We should either go and farm goats or make cheese or something, or perhaps we should have tried to change everything. And we went to the powers that be and said, hey, guys, this might sound a little bit crazy, but do you want to fund us for a few years to go off and try to build a brave new world where everything can talk to everything else? And if it succeeds, I hear that it's possible to make money on this. I hear the web is an open standard, and yet somehow people seem to make money on top of it.
Once or twice,
Google's doing pretty well, right? Yeah, in a few places. So, I mean, why don't we build the same ecosystem that has never existed before for interoperable VoIP and messaging, and IoT as well? Because if we think that fragmentation is bad for voice and video and messaging apps, look at how bad it is for Internet of Things devices, where you're completely siloed. You can't have your Garmin talking to your Fitbit cloud service or vice versa. It's a disaster.
It is a disaster. So what's the company that sponsors you, that sponsors this?
So the company is called Amdocs, and they're a telco solutions provider.
Yeah. Huh.
It's a bit of an unusual one.
That I would have never said, this is going to be an
Amdocs
Amdocs project. Like, this just... That's awesome.
Well, it's... Amdocs are very generous in paying our salary, but obviously Matrix.org itself is an independent outfit. It's a .org, it's a non-profit project, and we're actually setting it up as a UK limited by guarantee company, which is a bit like a US 501
C3. Yeah. Interesting.
With kind of directors from the community and a process to try to preserve Matrix so that there's no single company like Amdocs who have any control over it, but it's run and owned by the community. On the flip side, Riot, however, is actually owned entirely by Amdocs and is a way to
basically an incubated startup making, which is the one who is going to bring revenue on top of the Matrix project.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Makes total sense. I had no idea Amdocs was involved at all. I have no concerns with that. I just was totally surprised.
That's cool.
All right. I have two things I wanna talk to them about. But Matt, is there anything you want to ask them before I dive into this final little bit here?
I think I would part with one question. One thing I want to know is if you guys had a wish list of anything you could do in the whole wide world as far as where you see the progress of adoption in a year, what would it be? Like, what type of individuals would you like to see using this? Would you like to see the geekier folks using it? Would you like to see casual folks using it? A mixture of the two? better press coverage? Like what's on your wish list for things that you would like to see happen over the course of the next year with the project? Better hardware
On the Riot on the Riot side, it's really get to have anyone using it. So expanding from the current very geeky community and getting really, really to mass market.
Yeah.
And have more bridges and more integrations in this.
Yeah,
awesome.
We really wanted to work for both. Just like Slack seemed to be appealing both to developers as well as normal companies. I honestly think that the tech should be usable for everybody, and ideally, even the WhatsApp kind of use cases or the iMessage sort of scenarios. We want it to be a very, very generic fabric that basically for that sort of thing. On my side, on the techie side, I guess my dream would be to have the rumor Rust server finished and running, so that there are 2 fully functional server implementations, one of which is hopefully going to be about 20 times faster and 100 times smaller than the Python one.
And requires us a little bit less RAM, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit.
Doesn't have its own power station. I mean,
Python's great. We wouldn't be here without it. But we're looking forward to getting a native implementation. But also bridging. As in, my dream would be that we would have bridges to everything.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention that we've got a lead purple bridge in process. And lead purple is the thing that Pigeon and Game used to use to talk through to AOL and ICQ and all those things.
Wow.
I did a prototype myself for this, which is so close it's untrue. It can talk to Skype, it can talk to Facebook. And if we had somebody, especially if there's anybody listening in the community who wants to hack on Lead Purple and finish that bridge so that we can suddenly jump into WhatsApp and Telegram and Hangouts and all the other things.
Basically everything that Lead Purple supports. So everything that Pigeon supports. Okay.
Wow.
If anyone listening is interested in that, because that kind of sounds badass, how do they get started in the project? Where would you like them to go to learn more, to get in contact with you guys?
So I guess from the dev perspective, everything is on matrix.org, and it's got the APIs and the spec, and obviously on GitHub is all the source for all these different projects. And on the Riot side, to actually talk to people, the fastest way is to just go to riot.im and jump onto the app on F-Droid or iOS or the web.
Or Chrome. And the good thing is that you don't even have to create an account. They support guest access, so you just jump in and access a room and start chatting with us without any faff.
Very different to Slack, where it's told, can you click here in order for us to send you an email so that you can create another account to boost our account stats just in order to join a room? I said, what? Why? Why would you do that? Just click a button and start talking. Sure.
Exactly.
My final question, because this is actually pretty fantastically awesome, and I really want to thank you guys for hanging out with us, because I think this is legitimately important, and I want more people to be checking this out. But much more important question: we have 2 awesome people sitting right in front of us. Which one of the 2 of you is a better singer? I mean, seriously. I don't know.
More comfortable in doing so. Maybe that would be
Yes, that is a good way to go, Matt. Matt, now I don't know if our guests have been watching the show as of late, but guests, here's the quick rundown. The show does not have a theme song. At the beginning of each show, me and Matt sing our new theme song for the show, which is nice because then, we don't have to deal with any licensing issues. We just sing whatever we want to sing. When we have 2 or more guests, we have a standing policy, and we like to not tell them ahead of time because it's funner that way, that one of them has to sing the outro theme song for that episode. The good news here is that you can sing whatever you want, and it only has to be about 5 seconds long. Oftentimes, the noises that come out of Matt's mouth don't resemble anything that any human has ever made, but technically we call it a song.
More like a Wookiee squatch, but yeah.
It's more like a Wookiee squatch. So here's how this works. I'm going to stand back, and I'm going to count to 3. When I finish counting to 3, one of you can have jumped in and said, I will sing the outro theme song. If not, I will choose one of you. And I've already chosen in my mind who it's going to be. So I'm just going to sit back here for a second. 1. Do you think anyone's going to jump in here, Matt? Or do you think I'm going to have to call him out?
That's anybody's ballpark. It's hard to say.
It's hard to tell what's going to happen. And three.
Hard to say.
And yeah, you're volunteering. That's awesome. That's fantastic. No, I heard you say
not it, but okay.
Yeah. I heard a volunteering.
I am.
Huh?
It's often Brazil for me. It's in Brazil, where hearts were entertaining June. We live beneath the silver moon. Yada yada da 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 yada.
And cut. That was perfect.
Perfect.
That's it.
Perfect.
That's all it took.
There we got it in the end.
Nice and easy. It's fantastic.